It's just me. What do you know? So, welcome to episode number 167 of Mirrorless Minutes. Rolling solo again this week. Jerry messaged me a couple minutes ago and said that he is dealing with some dealership issues with his Honda Element, his little photo box mobile. I didn't even know he still had that thing. So it's just going to be me tonight. And I think I'll try to cover the topic that Jerry was going to cover, sort of. I don't really have the hands-on experience with specifically what he was going to be talking about exactly, but I can talk to it. You did end up getting the 12 to 100, Steve. That is awesome. It is totally awesome lens. It's when it first came out, I like to tell people that I was disappointed in Olympus. I'm like, what are you doing? Like an all-in-one lens? All-in-one lenses aren't usually like the greatest thing ever, but man, they hit it out of the ballpark with the 12 to 100. It's honestly, it's like the lens that's almost always on my Olympus bodies. So, yeah, good for you for getting that. It's a banger lens. What's up, Mr. D? It's just me tonight. And so, a couple of topics I'm going to talk about tonight. Hey, we got John Thomas in the house. Good to see you, buddy. I'm going to talk about what's new coming out in Lightroom. I was totally freaking stoked to hear that announcement earlier in the week. And then going to be talking about iPhones. Yeah, I'll actually talk about an iPhone. In addition to just kind of talking about some of the things that I've been shooting lately. And yeah, just the general, I would say the general banter that comes along with this show. But if there's banter going on and it's just me, is that just craziness? Hey, gorgeous. My sweetheart in the chat room tonight. That's always a bonus for me. So I guess I'll just jump right into this and start talking about, I think I'll just talk about Lightroom first because that was going to be my topic anyways. Who knows? Maybe Jerry will make it in last minute and he can talk about iPhones. But so I don't know how many people saw the news from Adobe on what they're going to be doing in upcoming versions of Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw. I don't know that it's going to be on. It sounds like it's going to be on all the versions of Lightroom, even Lightroom CC, and I thought I read even mobile versions, but they're talking about advanced masking features built in that utilize AI. So if you're using the Creative Cloud and you're using Adobe, much Photoshop, that is, you've got this object selection tool that works. It works really well. As somebody who in their day job in marketing, when I'm doing product photography, there are times I need to isolate my product against a background so I can remove the background quickly and make, a transparent background. Before I was using the pen tool and the quick selection tool and things like that, and then having to refine it. And Matrix lighting. Yeah, it is. I'm celebrating the Matrix 4 whenever that comes out. Hopefully it's not a turd, but we'll see. I'm a big Matrix fan. It was a life-changing movie series as far as the effects in it when it came out. I've got a crazy backstory about going to see that that's not suitable for this show, but off on a tangent here. But so anyways, the object selection that is in Photoshop, what I would consider a more advanced version of that, looks like it's coming to Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw. And if you get a chance, swing over to the Adobe YouTube channel and look up that video. It's pretty amazing. The example that they give comes in really handy for somebody who shoots a lot of things outdoors. For me specifically, I see it relating to. The example that they show in their video is they've got a child on a beach. And if you wanted to do, we'll say, global adjustments to the background, like you needed to, I don't know, tone down the exposure. It was overexposed a little bit. You can let Adobe grab the child because it's going to know, it'll tell by your composition and by the fact that, like, a person in the foreground is the main focal point. It'll use AI. It'll isolate that subject and you can adjust them individually, or you can invert that selection and adjust the background. But what really blew me away is that you can do this masking. It appears to be in layers. So let's say you wanted to select, I'll use their example, they had a child. So you select the child in the foreground, but then you can add another layer to that of selection. And instead of selecting like the entire background, you select just the sky. So if you wanted to raise the exposure on the child and the foreground that they're standing in, you could adjust those two things, or you could just isolate just the sky and adjust that. It's really, really crazy robust. It looks a lot more robust than Photoshop. And Photoshop, again, for me, because I don't know if there's another way to do this, I would be working in multiple layers and selecting things individually. It just seems like a lot more work. In Lightroom, it looked like it was such a fast process to isolate, what it was that you wanted to be working on. And I think it's really cool. It's one of those things that I think is further going to push people away from the need to use Photoshop for a lot of things in their photography, which I hope I don't ever see Photoshop go away. There are things that it does still leaps and bounds better than you could, well, I shouldn't say than you can ever do in Lightroom, but then you can currently do in Lightroom. But I suppose they're closing that gap quicker and quicker, it seems like, as they come out with these releases. So again, if you get an opportunity, just swing over to either Adobe's Facebook page or just swing over any of their social accounts. And I'm sure that video and their mentions of that feature are still relatively high in their feed. And check it out. It's super cool. And I think it's something that, regardless of what subject matter you're shooting, I could see everybody at least tinkering with it and finding ways to use it in their photography. I know in landscape photography, it'll be super cool. Again, as I kind of move a little further away from, I'm trying to use filters a little less, just because the system I have is bigger and bulkier. It's not as convenient sometimes. There are times, obviously, when I'll take my filter system out when time is not even part of the equation. But if it's a last minute thing, or if I'm, well, like I was when we were in Oregon, we were hiking all over the place, and sometimes it just wasn't convenient to pull out the filters, then it's a little bit easier to get a similar effect in post. And especially using these tools, it'll make it definitely a lot easier. So Steve says software is getting pretty amazing these days. Pretty soon we can get a pretty basic camera and do some spectacular stuff. You can do that now. Really, if you've got decent glass and a moderately modern sensor, I feel like you can pretty much do damn near anything. It used to be, I guess, if there was a downside to, well, say like Micro Four Thirds, because of the sensor size and noise, that's becoming less and less of an issue with not just software outside of the camera itself, with Topaz denoise and On1's denoising software, but even in camera, the processing power inside the cameras now is ridiculous. You look at something like the EM1X or the latest EM1 Mark series cameras, with dual processors. There's so much computing power built into them that they're actually doing a really good job in camera of helping to mitigate some of the noise that you would see. But I get what you're saying, though. You could probably go and get an old camera and, let software fix everything. So it's pretty cool for sure. And like I said, I'm excited to see that update roll out for Lightroom. And I wish I would have written it down or paid a little bit more attention, but I think that's rolling out later in October, if I'm not mistaken. So it's definitely coming out this year. So that'll be a cool update, and definitely something that I'll probably go over on the show, because I've done in the past once or twice, sort of like a live video editing session. And I think that's something that I'd like to demo, on the show here, just show what the capabilities of it are, at least after I've used it for a minute, so I can kind of work my way through it and not look like an idiot trying to figure it out for the first time in front of everybody. I think it'll be pretty cool. I can't lean on Jerry to talk, and as my mouth gets dry, I need to stop for drinks. So you'll have to bear with me. So the other subject that we were supposed to talk about tonight as a pair I'm looking down in the corner here to see if Jerry snuck in. I just don't think he's going to make it. Um, so the release or the announcement and release of the iPhone 13. Now, Jerry shoots a lot with his phone, and I do from time to time. I don't really ever share anything that I shoot with my phone because I'll be honest, I've never taken using my phone seriously as a tool for photography. But as the phones keep getting better and better, and at work, I've got a work phone that I changed positions at work, so I now have a company phone, and I got to choose whatever phone I wanted, and I didn't want to wait for the 13, so I got the 12 Pro Max. And I just figured, what the heck, I'll give it a go. I've had Google Pixel devices, and those are always amazing cameras. And it's been a while since I've even owned an iPhone. I tend to be an Android person. So when I got the iPhone, I decided I'd give it a shot and just kind of see, if I could use my phone as like I don't want to call it a primary camera, but more like oops, I forgot to bring a camera, but I still want to shoot seriously camera. I never forget cameras almost ever. So that's kind of a stretch for me. But regardless, I decided to just kind of take it seriously during the week and take a few shots. And I'll share those here in a minute. But I was hoping that Jerry would have gotten his iPhone 13 by now. Honestly, that's probably why he's not on the show, because he doesn't have it yet. He was waiting on the delivery of that. So, but just some of the things that you can do with the iPhone, I find really impressive, especially now that they have a really great macro mode on the latest iPhone. The close focusing on it's insane. One of my coworkers, he just got the 13 Pro Max, and I asked him if I could snag it for a minute in the office and just kind of investigate this macro mode. It's pretty compelling, as an option. I hate to say it because I love the process of using I don't want to say real camera. I don't want to offend anybody, but I will just say it anyways. I like the process of using a real camera. I like where my headspace is when I have to move dials and push buttons and adjust settings and things like that in a very tactile feedback kind of way. So, but at the same time, the results are pretty good. I'm pretty impressed with how things turn out. And I feel like if I slowed down a little bit more with the phone and gave it a little bit more of a chance, I might find it being something that I shoot with a little more. But I do have a couple of photos that I shot this week with the iPhone 12 Pro Max, just to kind of see what it could do and put it through its paces. My first time shooting it, like seriously thinking about photography and not just taking quick snapshots with it, which is what I do with my phones 99% of the time. So, again, I'll kind of hold off on talking more about phone photography until the next show when Jerry's on, because he does just honestly have a lot more experience with that than I do, and he gets great results from it. So probably better to listen to him talk about it than me. It's not really hasn't been my forte, but I am going to honestly give it a go for a little while here and see what I can accomplish. So Justin jumped in the chat and said, speaking of light and noise, was thinking of switching over to Sony, as he's a current Olympus OMD EM1 Mark III shooter. He's kind of curious about what I think about it. He's getting into concert photography, pros and cons of switching. That's a really good question. And you, sir, are the third person this week that has asked me about a move from Olympus to Sony or supplementing their Olympus equipment with Sony equipment. It's a big one. So you say you're going to get into concert photography, and right out of the gate, I start thinking of, again, low light situations. And I love what I can pull off with the Sony cameras in low light. It's ridiculous. And I like to tell people, and have been for a long time, a camera, I don't want to call it a tool. But it is. It's a tool. And a lot of tools have specialty uses or they excel in one area. You know what I mean? So, yes, a flathead screwdriver can chisel wood. It's not the best, but it's damn good at turning, a standard screw, head screw into something. You know what I mean? So while you can definitely shoot concerts with Olympus gear, and I have a friend here in Michigan, Brooke, and Brooke is like huge in the concert scene over in the Metro Detroit area. She shoots everything from like major acts, Greta Van Fleet, just whoever, just big acts in Detroit, all the way down to small local bands. And she started off shooting with the Olympus gear. And she kind of got into Olympus from going on a workshop with Mark Miller and I. She was a former Canon shooter when she first got her first camera, made the move over to Olympus, loved the gear. Loved it when she wasn't doing concert photography. She ended up shifting her whole entire career over to concert photography, had a day job and everything, left that all behind and is a full-time concert photographer in Detroit. And she started to find that she just didn't have the performance that she needed for concerts. She loved the lighter gear. She loved that, she's a smaller person, so for her to carry a giant, huge DSLR or a full frame system kind of freaked her out. And she liked the small form factor, ended up going with the f1.2 primes, but still found even with that, she was still having to push her ISO really high on the Olympus cameras. And I think the last Olympus camera she had, it wasn't an EM1X. It was probably EM1 Mark II or Mark III. And she just wasn't getting the results she needed for concert photography. She ended up making the move. I think she's actually in a Canon R system now, but she ended up jumping up to a full frame camera because that tool works better in that setting. And, again, so I'm going to tell you, in my opinion, if concert photography is where your passion lies and you're going to be shooting venues that are low light, like these small intimate settings or, something that's not big stadium, chances are your light is not going to be great there. And you're going to want to be able to push that ISO super high. And I know that I said you can do a lot in software, and you can, and maybe before you jump ship and invest all this money into, switching to another system, I'd say give the software a shot and give it a look and see if it's something that gives you results that you're happy with. I'm sure that there's trial versions of all these denoising softwares out there, and run some of your high ISO Olympus concert shots through those and see if you're satisfied with the results, correcting noise in post. If it's not, then full frame might be the way to go. If you end up in, and you don't mention here in your question, which model of Sony, and I know you and I spoke before the show a little bit. So, and I suggest you had mentioned the A7 III, and I mentioned potentially looking at if you could swing it budget wise, because it is definitely a higher cost price point for an A7R III, or waiting a little longer for the A7 IV. And I suggested those two because the A7R III, in my opinion, from what I've seen so far, I've got the R3 and the 3 in low light. I think they're right on par with one another. I mean, I can push the R3 as high as I can the 3, but with the R, you've got, the added resolution, the added megapixels, the ability to crop in. And if you're shooting a concert venue, how nice is it to have, say, a moderately wide shot that you could also, it could serve double purpose, that one photo, by cropping in and creating a whole nother image out of it, something that I'm not good at. So Dwayne mentions the A7S. Those are like night vision. They're so good in low light. The only downside I would say to that is for somebody who's shooting concert photography is you're going to have a lower megapixel count, which for all intents and purposes doesn't really matter 99% of the time because of how the majority of people share their content. Those being 12 megapixel cameras, all the images you share online will be perfectly fine. Social media will be fine. But it comes down to if you did want to crop in or need to crop in because of where you're situated when you're shooting at 12 megapixels, once you crop in a little ways, now you're down to like, a 10 megapixel or 8 or 6 megapixel image, which at that point, given the resolution, even on mobile devices and stuff like that nowadays, if anybody's going to start, kind of really getting into your work, they're probably going to want to see something at a higher resolution than, 6, 8, or 10 megapixels. So if it were me, Justin, if you could swing bumping up from the A7 III to the A7R III or the A7 IV when it comes out, I think at the end of the day, it's going to give you a lot more options. But if you can't swing that, if it just doesn't make sense for your budget, I think you would be in love with the A7 III. It's a great camera. I have really zero complaints about it. The only complaint I have is something that's totally out of everybody's control, and that is that it doesn't have live composite and it doesn't have pro capture, and it doesn't have some of those features that my Olympus cameras do. That end, I will, if you should listen to the show often, you'll hear me say noise, dust, dirt, specks, all that crap. Like you're gonna learn to hate that about Sony cameras. I don't know if there's a way around it, if there's anything that can be done to prevent it. I'm going to guess that on the A7 IV, they'll probably have the feature that is on the A7. I think the R4 has it. Maybe it's where it can close the curtain when you're taking lenses off so that they're not exposed to dirt and debris. So, yeah, and you're welcome. Anytime, if you ever have questions, if you want sample images shot from the 3 or the R3 or something like that, just reach out to me anytime. I'd be glad to help you out with that decision. And Steve says both systems for micro four thirds, both systems for and micro four thirds times for each of them. Yeah, they all have. Okay, there we go. Full frame and micro four thirds. Are you drinking scotch too? Like I said, they're just different tools, and at the end of the day, they're both creating the same thing, but they have their strong points for sure. Everybody knows with micro four thirds that crop factor gives you such an advantage, with the longer lenses. You don't need such a giant kit to carry around, and just some of the features that come on the Olympus cameras for sure. But then you get into the Sony and the other full frame cameras, the dynamic range you get with those and the low light capabilities are just a whole other thing to enjoy. So can't go wrong with either one, but yeah, I think you'll end up making the right decision at the end of the day. So, well, Mr. Gaddy decided to show up. Better late than never. Yes, sir. Better late than never. I will take that any day of the week, even if you just showed up at the last 2 minutes to say, look what I did. I made it to the show. So Steve says just his fingers are drinking. Is that okay? I know I'm not the only one old enough to remember. Isn't that how Mork from Mork and Mindy drank, like with his finger? Anyways, so I'll jump into an image share and then just kind of talk about what I've been shooting lately, some things that I've hopefully got going in the not too distant future, and we'll just kind of go from there. So let me just do a little image share here. Well, what do you know? I'll make it full screen. There we go. Now you don't have to look at me. All right. So let me get this set up so that there. So now I know what I'm looking at here. So this was just shot the other day on my drive-in to work. We're getting into the autumn months, and one of the things that I love about the autumn months and the late spring months is you get these great misty, foggy, dewy mornings. And this was just one of those mornings. As I'm going into work now, it's becoming darker and darker. It's later that it gets lighter. Oh my gosh, I feel like an idiot trying to even say that. It's just dark now when I go to work. How about that? So I'm dealing with blue hour in this shot on my drive into work. And here in the Midwest, the soybean fields are just getting ready to be where they're being harvested now. I'm seeing a lot of them actually being harvested like this past week. And this one hasn't been yet. There's still a lot of yellow and green on the soybeans. So I was really kind of pumped to see this scene on my drive into work and jumped out of the car. It's handheld bracketed, 3 frames on the Sony A7 III with the Tamron 17 to 28. And just honestly, the easiest post processing in the world. It's just throw it into Lightroom, merge to HDR, pop open the hue, saturation, and luminance sliders, and just start playing with the colors a little bit. I wanted to make those yellows in the soybean leaves pop a little bit. I wanted to saturate and darken the blue sky, that blue hour sky. And Jerry James is sending me messages. He could just jump on chat or in the room. So anyways, so this is just a blue hour shot. It's been a while since I've taken the time to do any sort of blue hour shooting. So I couldn't resist this again with the fog in the low lying areas of these soybean fields. It's one of my favorite spots to shoot on my way into work. Anyways, it's just a picturesque area in my region. And I'm going to throw my watch away because Jerry won't stop messaging me. There we go. Hopefully nobody can hear that now. So this was shot again the other day. There's a cemetery down the road from my house, and I found last year that there is a species of mushroom that grows there. If you're a video game player and you recognize the red mushrooms from Super Mario Brothers, red with the white spots. So that mushroom is an Amanita muscaria, and this is another variety of that species, Amanita muscaria. Oh my gosh, am I going to say Latin stuff here? It's the variety Gesui, and it's more yellow-orange than red. And anyways, last year I noticed that these pop up all over the place in that cemetery, and I don't usually see those mushrooms this far south. They're all over in northern Michigan, but down this far south, I really haven't seen them too many places. So went out looking for them at the local cemetery, and this is with the Sony A7 III, but I'm shooting with my Minolta. It's an old lens that's adapted to fit the Sony. It's a 50 millimeter f1.4. So it's an old vintage manual focus lens. And I like the crazy kind of swirly out of focus areas you get around the edges with that lens. But I decided I wanted to give it a distinctly kind of, I don't know, vintagey, aged, analog feel to it. And my favorite way of getting an analog look is dropping it into analog effects. I still have the old Nik software version and not the new, I think it's DxO owns Nik now. But regardless, even the old version still works. So I dropped it into Nik analog effects, gave it a little bit of a fade, and threw in some light leak on it to get that kind of an old vibe to it. I love playing with photos this way. So the next one, if you're friends with me on Facebook, you probably saw this photo, but this is me attempting like real photography with the iPhone. So this is shot with the iPhone 12 Pro Max. And this is just one of the monochromatic modes or monotone modes that's built right into the camera. So this is pretty much straight out of camera. It's funny. So I artificially created the haze in the kitchen. Not with, so I quit smoking, but every once in a while I get that urge to have a cigarette. I smoked for a long time, quit for an equally long time, and then started again a few years ago, and then quit back in July. But to curb that kind of craving, I have a vape pen that has like a very low dose of nicotine in case I'm jonesing a bit. But one of the cool things with those vape pens is that you can make absurd amounts of, I'll call it smoke, but it's actually just, like vapor. So the light was coming into the kitchen in the morning, and I just blew a big puff of vape smoke at it and just started shooting photos of it. Oh my gosh, I was in there for 10 minutes, just walking around different angles, just shooting photos of vape smoke in my kitchen. Good Lord, it looked like the whole place was burning down by the time I was done, but it was so fun to get these cool shots and not have to break out, a bigger camera and start tweaking a ton of settings to get this look. It was fun right off of the phone. And then the next shot was, I was down in downtown Grand Rapids with my girlfriend and met up with Jerry James and his cousin Jared. And we just kind of walked around town. There's a big festival going on called Art Prize with a bunch of cool artists displaying their stuff all over downtown Grand Rapids. and we decided to take a break for lunch and went into a little pizzeria, and we were just kind of hanging out, and Jerry set his camera down on the table, and I decided to break out the iPhone and just this was the first time I'd gotten the iPhone out and started playing around with the different lighting modes that the iPhone has in it, which I thought was super cool. And set it up to, I don't even know the name of the mode. I'm not even going to try to guess. I haven't been an iPhone guy for more than like 2 weeks now, but it's like stage light or something like that. And as soon as I saw the picture on the back of the phone, or the back of the phone, on the phone, I thought, holy cow, this is super cool. And just snapped the photo. It was really, I mean, Jerry's just on the back side of that camera. You'd never know it. There's no post-processing here. This is all done straight in phone. And just pretty pumped with it. And I think this shot actually is the one that made me start thinking, man, maybe I can do some fun stuff, with a phone, whereas I never would have considered that before. In all honesty, I really wouldn't. My phone has just been more for like just behind the scenes documenting stuff. And then this was just like 2 days ago. Went out for breakfast before work and had my iPhone with me, and again, another misty, dewy morning, and the sun was starting to do some really cool stuff as it was coming through the clouds, and just pulled over and pulled out the phone and just started firing off a couple of different shots, tapping on different areas of the screen to see how the iPhone reacted to automatically adjusting for exposure and things like that, and was pretty impressed with how well it worked out. I'll be honest, I wish I had my Sony with me or an Olympus with me in this moment, because I could do more with the file. This is like I think on the iPhone, it's 12 megapixels for the wide angle lens. And, it's 12 megapixels on a super, super, super tiny sensor. So you lose a little bit of clarity and some resolution there. And, but overall, I mean, if this was just a social media share, I think it works out great. But again, for me, it was more about just seeing how well it handled a really high dynamic range scene. And I just let the camera do its thing on that. So it was kind of fun. Again, just kind of learning what you can do with a phone it's like getting a new camera, in all honesty. And then these last couple of photos. So this is my niece, and she's a senior this year, and she decided to give me the honor of being able to take her senior portraits along with my girlfriend, Shelly. So we met up with her and my stepsister up in Grand Rapids and just kind of tooled around and did her senior portraits up there. It's a lot of fun. I like shooting, photos of family more than I do strangers. I feel like there's a little less stress involved with it, but at the same time, there's a different kind of stress, not wanting to disappoint family members. But we had a lot of fun with it. And I think I spent the majority of the day shooting with just 2 lenses. Again, this is, oh man, I only talk about Sony all the time, but it's what I'm shooting with a lot more now. So it's with the Sony a7 III, and this is with the Viltrox 85 millimeter f1.8. And obviously some post-processing done here. And the post-processing I'm doing on most of my photos now is a hybrid between Lightroom and Luminar AI. Now, I know that if you see advertisements and reviews and stuff like that of Luminar AI, it's people that are showing how much it can do all by itself, all on its own. I've been digging in and not using the pre-canned modes in it, that just does everything for you. If you actually go into the edit panel, and then you can choose different things you want to edit, like light and contrast and things like that. So I tend to be a little more hands-on in Luminar AI, but at the same time, I will take advantage of some of the features that it has, like blemish removal, skin smoothing, eye whitening, iris enhancing. A lot of those features are so much quicker than working in Lightroom to use them. It's literally, you adjust a slider. And so I've used Lightroom for editing portraits. And again, I'm not a portrait shooter, so, take that with a grain of salt. But I've used Lightroom for portrait editing. I've used the On1 software. I've used Capture One. Oh my gosh. There's another suite that I can't remember what it is, but I've used like I think 4 different software suites to edit portraits, and I'll tell you what, Luminar's killing it with the AI, because in all those other suites, you need to select the center of the eye, and usually you're dragging some transformation handles around so that you can, get the adjustments to only affect where the eye is at. And the cool thing with Luminar is it uses AI to determine all those things. So it only affects the areas that it should be. And it's amazing at how well it works. So again, this one is edited with Luminar AI, and it's done. I did a few different things to this in AI. So I used it obviously for all of the portrait stuff. I just did a little skin smoothing lightly. I'm not heavy handed with that. Did a little bit of eye whitening and a little bit of iris enhancement. But then I also kind of gave it the effect that it has here. So it's got a cool thing that they call, oh my gosh, like mystical, I think, or something like that. It just makes me think of Lord of the Rings or something, whatever the name of it is. It's like mystical, or it's almost like an Orton effect is what it does. And so I'll apply that effect across the entire image. And then what's cool is you can mask out what you don't want affected. So then I just go back and basically erase it off of my subject. So that's kind of how I get this sort of a dreamy, glowy foliage that's going on in the background. And then I throw in a light leak at the top and a little bit of a sunburst to give those rays and call it a day. It's a lot of fun to get in there and play with some of those features. And yeah, I definitely agree. The Viltrox lenses they're ridiculous for the price. I mean, I'm super glad that they even exist, because I don't know that I would have gotten an 85 millimeter if I were buying one, like a G Master or something like that. So they're just so cost prohibitive. And for someone who doesn't shoot a lot of portraits, investing that kind of money wouldn't make sense. But that Viltrox lens, I honestly think was $300 or $400, and it nails focus every time. And it's gorgeous. I love the way it renders backgrounds. So again, another shot here. This one again, Viltrox 85 millimeter f1.8, Sony a7 III. When I'm shooting portraits like this, because on the Sony, I trust it, I'll shoot an auto ISO, and I don't have any examples from this session, but I do have photos that I've shot with that Viltrox, and sometimes the ISO might have to jump up, and it doesn't bother me at all on that Sony. So that tends to be my go-to mode. I have on eye detect autofocus. It's on continuous autofocus, auto ISO, and I just let it do its magic. Gosh, it's like so almost automated how well it works. But the hard part comes down to posing. And again, with this one, it's going to be the same thing. All the editing was done in Luminar AI to smooth the skin, blemish removal, eye whitening, iris enhancing, and a little bit of color pop on the lips. And then finally, the last one, same thing again. Actually, this was not with the Viltrox, though. This was with the Tamron 28-75, and not edited in Luminar AI. This one was edited in Lightroom. And by edited, I mean just a couple of blemishes removed, a light whitening to the eyes, and a little bit of an iris enhancing. Other than that, pretty much straight out of the camera for that. So a lot of fun to get out and shoot portraits. So not my comfort zone. I feel like an idiot every time I do it, but I have a lot of fun doing it anyways. So, I think I'll continue with it as long as people are asking. Yeah, I think that's it. I think I'll shoot people as long as there's somebody I know, although I'm supposed to have a shoot this Sunday. It's funny how this one came about. I love telling people things like this. So I took a photo about a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, of our local hardware store in the morning. We had a gorgeous sunrise. It was an amazing sunrise, and I was scrambling for what I could shoot of that sunrise. I had nowhere to go. I knew that I literally had probably just a couple of minutes before the light would be completely gone. It wouldn't be what it was. So I stopped in front of the hardware store and jumped out with my phone, with the iPhone, and shot a photo of the hardware store. posted it on our community Facebook page, and it blew up. I think it's at like 400 likes and a couple hundred comments. And somebody saw it and messaged me and said, I saw your picture of the hardware store on Facebook. Do you do senior portraits? And it just cracks me up every time that I could share a picture of a hardware store and someone wants me to shoot their kids' senior portraits. Stoked by it, honored, that they would assume that because I can shoot a hardware store, I can shoot people. So I signed up for it, decided to take it, but it looks like we might be getting rained out. If we don't, it'll be another portrait session with the A7 III and the Viltrox lens and the Tamron lenses. So yeah, I don't know. I don't even know why I'm telling you guys that. It's just such a weird thing to me. I can't look at what time it was. I had to throw my watch away because Jerry kept dinging me on the show. Well, it's been 40 minutes. I think I've spoken more than enough. Oh, wait. Oh, sweet. Down in Cincinnati, or are you going somewhere else? And I just randomly said that so people listening to the audio are going to wonder what's going on. So one of our guests in chat is going to be on a workshop with Tracy McGlosky. Dang, Jerry, too many messages. I know. I agree. He should have just been on the show. In Austin. Yeah, you'll have a great time. She's amazing. Amazing photographer. But you know that. If she wasn't, you wouldn't be going there to be on a workshop with her. So do me a favor. Seriously, do me a big favor. Tell her I said hi. Tell her she should not be a stranger so much. Just because I'm shooting with Sony doesn't make me a bad guy, okay? So... all right, I'll leave it at that. I've been babbling on long enough, and the scotch is just about gone. The scotch is gone. Ooh, that was a hot one. So you'll find us here. One of us, both of us, I don't know. But tune in a couple of weeks to the next episode of Mirrorless Minutes. And yes, indeed, cheers. I guess there's a tiny bit down there. You can never get it all out, can you? I have no idea what we'll be talking about next. It should be fun and entertaining because you guys know I'm going to give Jerry so much grief for not being here 2 shows in a row. All right, you guys. I'll see you in about 2 weeks. And until then, you guys get out there shooting. And if you'd like to jump on the show and chat sometime or be a guest, we're always open to that. It's always fun to share the camera with somebody else. You guys take care.